I always thought our marriage was founded on trust, faith, and mutual respect. My wife, Emily, was known for her devotion. Every Sunday morning, she'd put on her best dress, and I'd drive her to church before heading off to my own commitments. I never once questioned her, because the last place I ever expected betrayal to hide was inside the very house of God. It started small, the way these things usually do. She began spending more time at the church, Bible studies, choir rehearsals, charity meetings, late-night prayer groups. At first, I was proud. I thought she was deepening her faith, building a stronger bond with her community. But over time, something didn't feel right. There were late-night texts, sudden emergency meetings, and a tone in her voice whenever she mentioned Pastor Jacobs. Something too warm, too personal. One night, I came home earlier than expected. Emily had told me she'd be out at a committee meeting, but the house was silent. My gut twisted. I picked up her phone, something I'd never done before, and what I saw turned my world inside out. Those messages weren't about church or scripture. They were intimate, flirtatious, unmistakable. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Try to process how the woman I trusted so completely could be living a double life, and doing it all under the roof of faith. The next morning, I confronted her. My voice was calm, though everything inside me screamed. "Emily," I said, "we need to talk." She looked up from her breakfast, face composed, almost like she'd been preparing for this moment. I placed her phone on the table, the messages still open. For a split second, guilt flashed across her eyes, but she covered it quickly with denial. "He's just giving me spiritual guidance," she said. "You're reading too much into it." I wanted to explode, but I didn't. I swallowed my anger, because I knew rage wouldn't get me truth. Strategy would. I'd been fooled in the dark, but now I'd make sure the light exposed everything. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about justice, about tearing down the false image she'd built inside a community that praised her for her piety. So I waited. I watched every event, every whisper, every shared glance between her and that man. I noticed it all. I started attending services again, quietly, sitting in the back rows where I could observe. To most, their interactions looked innocent. But to me, every soft smile, every lingering look told a story I already knew. I documented everything: dates, times, words, gestures. My pain became precision. My heartbreak became focus. I wasn't just her husband anymore. I was the witness to her hypocrisy. Then the opportunity came. The church's annual sermon series was approaching, the one where Reverend Jacobs always spoke about morality, sin, and the consequences of straying from faith. That was my moment. I didn't need to yell or create a scene. I needed truth to speak for itself. So I reached out to a few trusted members of the congregation. Quietly, carefully, I told them what I'd found, and I made sure they knew it wasn't gossip. I had proof. Hard, undeniable proof. By the week of the sermon, Emily had no clue what was coming. She got dressed, smiled at me like everything was normal, and left for church. Meanwhile, I made sure the right people, elders, respected members, had all the information they needed. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Sunday arrived. The church was packed. The air felt thick with anticipation. I sat near the back, heart pounding, eyes steady. Emily walked in, radiant as ever, exchanging smiles, pretending her halo still gleamed. But when Reverend Jacob began his sermon, talking about betrayal, hidden sin, and those who disguise corruption behind a mask of virtue, I saw her face change. Her smile vanished. Her hands tightened around her Bible. "Those who hide sin behind holiness," he said solemnly, "believe they are safe, but truth always finds its voice." The room went still. Emily's eyes darted nervously from pew to pew, her composure slipping. No names were mentioned, but everyone who needed to understand did. The whispers began even before the final prayer. People looked at her differently, questioning, disappointed. The image she'd worked so hard to build had started to crumble right there in the sanctuary she thought protected her. I didn't move. I didn't gloat. I just sat there quietly, letting truth do what it always does, Reveal. That evening when we got home, Emily didn't speak. She avoided my gaze, her silence louder than any confession. I didn't need to ask questions. I already had every answer. The church, the people she'd impressed, the moral ground she'd stood on, all of it gone in one morning. I said nothing. There was no point. Her shame filled the space between us, heavy and undeniable. And as I stood there, I realized something. Betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hides in routine smiles and whispered prayers. But the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a light. She thought she could bury her sin behind sermons and good deeds. She underestimated patience. She underestimated me. In the end, I didn't just reclaim my dignity. I made sure her hypocrisy couldn't hide any longer, because deceit can pretend to live in holiness. But eventually, even in the house of God, it's revealed.